Nobody teaches us how to grieve a friendship, but so many of us have been quietly doing it for years. And it's true, nobody really teaches you how to grieve a friendship because there is no card for it. Nobody brings you food, nobody checks in on you a week after a close friendship quietly goes still. And yet, so many of us are walking around carrying this kind of loss, sometimes privately and sometimes without quite knowing what to call it. I don't mean that the friendship ended in some fight. I don't mean it in a way of a betrayal or something dramatic, something clear, something like a clear moment that you can point to. I mean the other kind, the one when nothing bad happened. It just got quieter. Probably fewer texts, plans that kept getting pushed back. And the day you notice, I genuinely can't remember the last time we really talked. And I'm not sure when that changed. I've had that realization more than once. And that what always got to me wasn't just the loss itself, it was also the silence around it. The feeling that I wasn't supposed to make it a thing, that it wasn't serious enough to actually grieve. The This episode is me saying that it is. Hello everyone and welcome back to In Her Element. I'm really glad that you're here for this episode. So today we are going to be talking about what actually happens to our friendships when life changes. And it can go both ways. Some friendships quietly fade. They just slowly become past tense, and that's a real loss that deserves to be named. But some friendships, they can survive years of distance, barely any contact, whole chapters of life in different directions, and then you're together again. And within 10 minutes, it's like nothing ever changed. That ease, that knowing that it's just still there. Both of those things are true, and we are holding on to both today. So, this one is for you if you've lost your friendship and never quite had the words for it. And it's also for you if you have someone in your life you haven't talked to in 6 months and you're quietly wondering if that means something. And it's for you if there's someone who has shown up for you through everything and you want to understand what that staying is actually made of. So let's talk about it. Okay, so most friendships don't end, they just slowly become past tense. And there's no big moments, no falling out, just a frequency that gradually gets lower and lower until one day you realize we went from talking every week to every month to a few times in a year to actually not really at all anymore. And I couldn't tell you exactly when that happened. And here's the thing that made me feel a lot better when I first came across it. This is incredibly common. More than half of us adults say that they've lost a close friend in the past 5 years. And the reason most of them give isn't some fight or some kind of betrayal. It's just life. Distance, two people moving through different seasons or at different speeds. So if you've been carrying this quietly, wondering if something is wrong with you or your ability to maintain friendships, you're not an exception. You are the rule. Adult friendships are genuinely hard to hold on to through change. And that's not a character flaw, it's just how it works. But I want to hold something alongside that because I think it's just as true and we don't talk about it enough. There's a completely different kind of friendship that just doesn't work like that. You can go a year without a proper conversation. You can live in different countries, be in completely different chapters of your life. And then you're finally together again or on a call. And within 10 minutes, you're laughing like no time has passed. The ease is still there. The understanding is still there. It just, that kind of friendship exists too. And it's genuinely one of the most beautiful things about being alive. So, you might ask, what's the difference? Why do some friendships thin out with distance and others just don't? I think some friendships run on frequency. They need the regular contact, the consistent check ins, and when that drops, something in the connection actually thins out. And that's not a bad thing. That's just how that particular relationship is. Other friendships are built on something that doesn't need maintenance to stay alive. A really deep understanding of each other, a shared history that goes beyond circumstance, a particular way of seeing each other that just holds even across years and distance and change. Neither one is better, they are just different. And I think part of what helps is knowing which kind you're in. So you're not measuring a friendship that runs on depth against one that runs on frequency and wondering why it feels different. Because research on adult friendship resilience finds that the friendships that are most likely to survive major life transitions are actually the most flexible ones. Where both people can tolerate distance without reading it as rejection and update their image of each other as both people grow. I think the quality that matters most isn't how often you talk. It's whether the friendship has room to hold who you're both becoming. And there's a term for the grief that comes when a friendship fades. Psychologists call this ambiguous loss, which basically means grief without the clear ending, without the rituals that usually help you process a loss. The acknowledgement, the support, the space to feel it. When a friendship quietly drifts, none of that happens. The grief just lives inside your regular life, surfacing when you hear a song or you find an old photo or go to text someone you used to tell everything to. I say that's a real loss and it deserves to be treated like one, not minimized and not explained away. I also want to talk about why certain seasons of life are so hard on friendships. Because I don't think we say this clearly enough. Think about the moments when everything in your life changed at once: a new city, a new job, or going back to school, getting married, having a child, losing someone, or a health scare. Could be a divorce. Any of those seasons can put real strain on the friendships around you. Not because anyone did anything wrong, but because they just change you. And sometimes the friendships that are built around a previous version of you struggles to hold the person that you're becoming. I have been in academic life for very long, and what I have noticed is how quietly isolating it can get. Not because there aren't people around you, but because the world you're living in becomes increasingly hard to explain to anyone who isn't in it. The particular pressures, the specific language, and sometimes the things that you're working on that almost nobody fully understands. You can be surrounded by people and still feel like the version of you that your oldest friends knew doesn't quite live here anymore. And I think a lot of people feel that whatever their version of it is. And then there's a particular kind of loneliness that I want to name for a moment. When you move somewhere new, be it a new country, a new city, far from everyone who knows you don't just lose proximity to people. You lose something more specific. You lose the friends who knew you before you could explain yourself. The ones who got your references without any translation, who knew your family, your neighborhood, your humor in its original language. That kind of intimacy takes years to build. And when you move, you're starting from scratch. Building that again in a new place, sometimes in a second language, while also figuring out a completely different life, is genuinely one of the harder things a person can be asked to do quietly. And we really don't acknowledge that enough. Studies on women who have immigrated consistently find that the loss of close friendships is one of the most painful parts of the experience. And not just in the early months. Researchers describe how women feel a deep sense of loss when the people who truly knew them are no longer nearby. Building new friendships from scratch without shared history or cultural shorthand takes much longer than most people expect. The loneliness in that gap is completely normal, and it has nothing to do with how likable or warm or interesting you are. Whether it's a big academic season, a move, a career change, a relationship change, a loss, the pattern is the same. When your life reorganizes, your social world reorganizes too. And sometimes the friendships that were perfectly suited to one chapter simply can't make the crossing into the next one. That's allowed to be a loss, even when it makes total sense. Can I just say something directly for a second? You are allowed to grieve a friendship. You are allowed to feel the real loss over someone who is still alive and well and living their life, not just with you in it anymore. And that's not dramatic at all. That's not you being too sensitive or or holding on for too long. It means that the relationship actually mattered to you. And things that matter are worth mourning when they change. And here's something that I find genuinely fascinating about this. And I say fascinating because I think understanding it actually helps. Your brain doesn't really distinguish between different kinds of social pains. The grief you feel when a friendship fades registers in the same way, same parts of you as any other significant loss. It's real and it's neurologically real. And yet, there is no ceremony for it. No acknowledgement, no rituals, no one checking in. So you end up carrying something that's real in your nervous system while the world is basically telling you it's not a big deal. That gap is actually very exhausting sometimes, and it can make the grief sit heavier than it needs to. And psychologists, as I mentioned, use the term ambiguous loss to describe that grief that doesn't come with social recognition or any clear ending. Research shows that this can actually be harder to process than more acknowledged forms of grief. Because without ceremony or cultural validation, people are left grieving something real while also wondering if they even have the right to grieve for it. So name it. Let it be a loss. Give yourself permission to feel it fully. And then there's usually a question that follows. When a friendship fades without an obvious reason, we tend to look inward. What did I do? What could I have done differently? Should I have reached out more? Should I have been more available? Those questions come from a place of caring, and that's worth recognizing. But they can also keep you in a loop that doesn't have a clear answer. Because sometimes nothing went wrong. Two lives just moved forward and moved differently. Neither person failed. The friendship just reached a natural edge of what it could hold at that point in time. Getting to that place where you can hold this sadness without needing a reason for it, it takes time. But it's definitely possible. And it's a lot kinder to yourself than staying in the question of what went wrong when the honest answer might just be life happened. Okay, I don't want to leave this conversation in the loss because this episode is really about both things. Let's talk about the friendships that make it through. Because here's what I have noticed. The big life transitions that test your friendship so hard, they also show you something you couldn't have known before. When everything around you shifts, you find out pretty quickly who is actually there. Not just there in the nice abstract sense, actually showing up, actually present. And those people, the ones who reached across the distance, who kept the thread going, who were just there during the hard season, they are worth paying attention to. Because that kind of staying is someone choosing you when choosing you was optional. And staying doesn't always look the same. I think that's worth saying. For some friendships, staying looks like presence. The regular check ins, the voice notes, the person who doesn't let too much time go by without being in touch. That kind of consistency is its own form of love. And for other friends, staying looks completely different. It looks like the friend you haven't talked to properly in probably 6 months, maybe longer, and then you're finally on a call, and within 10 minutes, you're back in it, laughing about the same things, getting each other immediately. No awkward catch up phase, just there. Like no real time has passed, even though it did. And both of these are real. Both of those are worth having. And you don't have to rank them or wonder which one is better. They're just different kinds of love expressed differently. And research on what makes adult friendships survive transitions points to one quality above all others: flexibility. The ability to tolerate distance without interpreting the ability to tolerate distance without interpreting it as abandonment. The willingness to hold a changing version of your friend with curiosity instead of resistance. It's not about how often you talk. It's about whether the friendship has room to hold who you're both becoming. What I keep coming back to is this: the friendship that survive aren't always the oldest ones. They are not always the ones with the most shared history. They are the ones that have room for growth, room for distance, room for you to become someone different from who you were when that friendship started. Curiosity over resistance. I think that's what it really comes down to. And one last thing, because I found this to be genuinely true and I want to say it out loud. Sometimes the friendships that carry you through a transition aren't the ones you came in with, they are the ones you found in the middle of it. The person who understood your specific situation because she was living it too. The colleague who became something more, someone in a completely unexpected place who turned out to be exactly who you needed. And for some of us, and I think this is worth saying out loud because it doesn't get said enough. Certain friendships become something more than friendship. They become family. The family you choose rather than the one you were born into. For women who have moved far from home, for women whose relationship with their birth family is probably complicated or distant, for women who are building a life in a country that isn't the one they grew up in, the friends who show up in the gaps that family should have filled, who are there for the birthdays and health scares and the 2 a.m. phone calls and the ordinary Tuesday nights, those friendships are family. They deserve to be named as such. There's no lesser word for what that is. It's one of the most profound things adult life can give you. A person who choose to be in your life without any obligation to be there. Just love. Just choosing over and over again. And while we're being honest, I want to name something that I think a lot of us quietly do at some point in adulthood. We stop trying to make new friends. Not loudly, not as a decision, just gradually. Life gets full. The efforts feel like too much. And there's a vulnerability reaching out to someone new that starts to feel a little too, exposed the older you get. And so we just stop. We tell ourselves we have enough people, or that it's too late, or that we're not sure how to do it anymore. I think about this a lot because the loneliness that comes from quietly giving up on new connections is its own specific kind of ache. And sits there quietly and silently because we rarely name it as a choice. We just feel vaguely disconnected and don't get quite understand why. And if that resonates with you, if you've been in a season where you stopped reaching towards new people, I just want to say it's not too late. And it's not weird at all. The research on adult friendships is clear that new meaningful connections are possible at any age and at any stage. It just requires a little more intentionality than it did when you were 22 and sharing a dorm hallway with like 40 people your age. The reach is still worth making. Not every friendship you need already exists in your life right now. Some of the best ones are still ahead of you. So before I let you go, I want to say something that I actually mean. The friendships that didn't make it through your transitions, the ones that faded without a conversation or without any closure, probably without a goodbye that felt like a goodbye, those still mattered. The person who knew a version of you that no longer fully exists in the same way, the friendship that held you through one chapter and just couldn't make it to the next, that's still a part of your story. You're allowed to carry it with love and a little sadness at the same time. And now for the friendships that stayed, or the ones that can always pick right back up where you left it off. I hope you tell them, not just feel it, actually tell them. Because the people who have shown up for you through seasons, through all the changes and the distance, they should know what that means to you. Don't let that go unsaid. You can, so who in your life has stayed and what do you think that staying is made of? You can sit with that quietly or write it down or honestly just pick up the phone and tell your friend because the last one might be the most worth doing. And also, thank you for being here today. This one was a very tender, and I'm really glad we got to have this conversation. If it found someone who needed it, share it with them. You probably already know who it was or who that is because some friendships are for a season and some are for life, and both are worth honoring. I'll see you in the next one.